used in the economy to produce a given level of output. So simply speaking, how much money you have, what you can do with it, what is the maximum you can get for what you're putting in there. Productivity is considered a key source of economic growth and competitiveness, and as such is basic statistical information for international comparisons and a country's performance. Productivity growth constitutes an important element for modeling the productive capacity of economies. Philosophical definition. So on the softer side, productivity can also be defined as a state of mind, an attitude that seeks the continuous improvement of what exists. It is a conviction that one can do better today than yesterday, and that tomorrow will be better than today. And if you're following closely, you will see here where continuous improvement comes into play. So productivity is fundamentally maximizing what you have by obtaining the greatest output for input. What are the focus areas here at the JPC? Our focus area has to do with capacity building. We look on ourselves as being a center of excellence. We also were heavily involved in research and knowledge management, advocacy, and consultancy. And later on, as we get into the other workshop, you will hear more about what we are doing here. So the center consists of two main units that are vital in effectively achieving its mandate. The units are the Research and Measurement and the Technical Assistance Services Unit, TASU. Some of the services that we offer include public education on productivity, productivity improvement audits, policy research, consultation, productivity improvement workshops. The Research and Measurement Unit is to provide decision makers in various organizations with information and knowledge in order to improve the competitiveness and productivity of economic sectors. And this is throughout Jamaica. The unit achieves its objectives by conducting research on the productivity of the economic sectors, as well as providing relevant and up-to-date productivity data. The research unit looks at the national sector and the industry level data. So the research unit is involved in gathering a lot of data, doing a lot of analysis, and finding out what it is that is happening throughout the economy, giving us some kind of background information, looking at our landscape, and following through to ensure that whatever it is that they do, that this can be an input into policy making for the country. And you can understand how important having something like a productivity policy is, and this would be critical in ensuring that Jamaica as a whole improves productivity on a national level. So the output of the unit, as a follow-on, the unit produces articles, research papers, workshops, seminars are conducted, generate policy paper for approval, develop productivity perception instrument, quarterly and annual reports are also done by our research unit. Our Technical Assistance Service Unit, TASU. TASU provides consultancy services both within the public sector and the private sector. The unit conducts productivity audits, capacity building through tailored workshops and training, and productivity consultations. Some of our work TASU output has been work permit, business process reengineering consultancy, National Health Fund project, publication of articles assessing education and productivity. We have worked with companies like Devon House, Honeybun, Creamy, and a number of other companies, Grace Kennedy, etc. And what we have done is over the years, we have had significant and made significant contribution in helping these companies to improve their productivity by being more efficient and helping to save money in the long run. The Office of our Chief Technical Director, this department is responsible for the overall administration of the department, all administrative, procurement, safety matters, etc. And the unit also deals with public relations. We deal with contacting various stakeholders and very many publics as it relates to public relations. So some of the JPC strategic objectives. One is to increase research. That is on a national scale that affects national productivity. We also look to strengthen technical capacity of individuals and enterprises to increase productivity. We also look to increase the skills and technical capacity of our staff, and we facilitate the implementation and adoption of ICT systems. Productivity Improvement Planning Initiative. The center looks to encourage the efficient use of technology and effective utilization of virtual space in carrying out business activities, encouraging the adoption of effective and tailored flexible work arrangement, flexi-time, to engage workers and boost workers' productivity during COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, and pursuing and implementing a national strategy for training and development techniques specific to growing, improving productivity at both the enterprise and at the national levels. We also look to encourage stakeholders we engage in community-based programs with a view to stimulating higher productivity amongst workers from those communities that benefited from such programs. Also, engage in the education sector in productivity-based collaboration to promote productivity internally among academic institutions while simultaneously assisting with educating other sectors of the economy about productivity. We are led by a board, and the board provides strategic and policy direction to the JPC. They ensure that the operational programs of the JPC are in line with the national development plans and priorities, provide guidance and advice resulting in the implementation of strategies that will ensure that the JPC records one, substantial national impact on economic growth, that we achieve high level of satisfaction by customers and stakeholders, that we have ongoing improvement in internal processes, and continuously that we have learning and growth taking place. This is our reference that we have drawn on, and we can be contacted at 948-6168 or 922-1598. You can email us for more information at jpc@mlss.gov.jm. So I thank you very much, and I would like, if you have any questions, so that we can answer. Don't be shy. Are there any questions? Our team is here. Or I guess we have been quite comprehensive in telling you a little bit about the Productivity Center and what we're about. And we're here to engage you. So please feel free to ask any questions you'd like to. I'm going to open up the PowerPoint again so you can have a quick look.
Good morning.
Okay, we have a question. Keep them coming. And well, I have RC here is asking if we have worked with any tertiary level institution. And yes, we have. We've worked with several tertiary institutions. Some of our interns are from institutions such as UTech. We've worked with UWI. We've worked with UCC. So we've worked with a lot of tertiary institution, and we welcome, further engagement from these institutions, because in terms of who we work with not only tertiary institution, but right across from the primary level to the secondary level, right through. We have been engaged in having productivity clubs in the schools. We go out and we make presentations to these institutions, encouraging our young minds and teaching them about productivity and how important it is to really get on the bandwagon and being able to be a part of the whole productivity process. So yes, we do work with these institutions. So we have any other questions? I think there are other questions. Okay, when some is reading another question.
What impact would improve productivity in Jamaica?
Okay, who else the question? Okay. Okay, so somebody's asking what impact improving productivity will have on Jamaica. Well, what are the foundation to growth and to us as a country becoming a first world country is that we have to address the whole matter of productivity. Productivity looks at efficiency, how well you work, how well you study, what do you do with what you have, what kind of output are you getting for what for whatever you have. So if you have one, how can you make that one into two? If you have two, how can you make that two into three, or maybe four, or maybe six? And that is really what productivity is all about. So for Jamaica as a whole, productivity is extremely important, and we need to get everyone to get on board and to realize, and not only to realize, but to understand how important it is for us all to be productive, for us to research and understand, and to see how we can all make our contribution to being productive, to lead to a more productive Jamaica, and to lead to a more productive country. All right, so we have another question. Go ahead, Winslow.
What's new for JPC, and are there any upcoming initiatives?
Well, for JPC, we're always on the cutting edge. And one of the things that the center is currently working on is a national policy. And you can understand how a national policy will have implications for our entire country, because we will have persons who will understand what are the guidelines, what are the implications for what they do, how they can improve their businesses, how they can improve their schools, what it is that they need to do. And so this is going to have a national impact on our country as a whole. And one of the things that the JPC is known for is that some time ago, we conducted a study on electricity, and it ended up saving every single Jamaican money, because the government had hard facts, they had research to look at, and they could make proper determinations based on the report and the research that we had done here at the center. So our efforts have not gone without having merits and have brought in returns to the country. I'm seeing another question here. There are many people who are not aware that Jamaica has a productivity center, and they're not really familiar with the importance of productivity. What is being done to sensitize the wider nation of productivity? Thank you very much for your question. Well, yes, there are many people who are not aware that there is a productivity center. However, the center is committed to getting the information out there. We have had several workshops. We have had several World Productivity Day functions now where we have invited schools. We have been streaming live both on radio, on the social media, and we have been getting the information out there. We have been working with our parent ministry, the Ministry of Labor, we're very committed to ensuring that we ourselves are very productive and we're meeting as reaching to as wide an audience as possible. So although there are persons that may not be familiar, there are a lot of Jamaicans who are very, very much aware of the center and of the important work that we're doing. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be continuing to sensitize the nation about productivity, about what we are doing, and our focus of late has really changed to really be more national in terms of our outlook and how we are going about what it is that we're going to be focusing on. So we do intend to have a national reach. We also have another question here. Recently, it was alleged that the internationally renowned company Uber has launched services in the Jamaican economy. With considering our current transport system, how should we view the inclusion of said company in our economy from a productive standpoint? Okay, well, this is a very, very important topic, and this is a topic that actually I wrote an article. You can Google it in the Gleaner from Colette Barham on our whole transportation system. And this is an area that we have to ensure that we look at and that we address. Now, in terms of the Uber services as it is in Jamaica, I am not currently in a position to speak on this, but I do say that this is an area I know that our ministers have been looking at, and that I'm sure that we will hear more about this in the future. But of course, transportation is one of the major pillars of productivity, and this is an area that the center will actually be looking at in the future. Thank you very much for your question. Is there any more questions, Winsome? Okay, we have another question.
Was the JPC involved in the Vision 2030 planning?
Okay, I'm gonna ask Winsome to repeat the question for us. Please repeat the question.
Was the JPC involved in the Vision 2030 planning?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. The JPC has been involved with the planning in terms of where we're getting to, and all of our decisions, because we're a part of government, we have been working with our partners in terms of planning, in terms of policy, in terms of ensuring that in the long run that we're becoming a more productive nation. So in terms of productivity, in terms of Vision 2030, yes, we have been involved through our partners, we have made contributions, and we continue to work with our various government partners to make the requisite contribution and to ensure that we have the kind of impact that is critical for our country's development. Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Yes, one more.
Okay, we have another question.
Does JPC have any plans in place to do weekly workshops in schools and organizations to educate more people on the importance of productivity?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. The question is asking if we intend to have weekly workshops in terms of in schools and in different organizations. We are having a series of workshops in terms of, for example, this is our World Productivity Day Forum, and we have been having quarterly forums that we have open to the public and that we encourage persons to come on board and be a part of it, to actively participate, to send in your ideas to us, to speak to us on it, what it is that you would like to see happen, you know, how it is that you would like to get involved. You know, we encourage you to send your ideas in. In terms of having weekly workshop, we are not at that point where we could actually undertake weekly workshops, because as you can understand, the center is a small unit, it's a small department, and a lot of our energies are focused on doing research. We do think that workshops, getting out into the schools and that kind of thing is very, very important. However, we're not able to undertake that currently at this junction, but it is certainly something that we will be looking at in the future. And thank you very much again for your questions. Are there any further questions? Okay. You're welcome to ask more questions. Keep them coming. We still want to communicate. Want to hear from you what you're thinking. Why do you think that this whole area of productivity is important? What do you think that you can contribute in your neck of the woods? You can tell us any kind of experience that you have had, that kind of thing, how you can work with the center to help as well to get the word out there, which organization you're currently from, that kind of thing. So, yeah. And we're going to ask you to stay tuned after this presentation. We're going to be having the workshop on the foundation of production. And after that, we'll be looking at improving your productivity, the 5 steps. So we've been having a very important conversation, and we've really been looking, and I can see that a lot of persons are really interested in the whole area of productivity and what it is that you can actually do to improve productivity, in Jamaica and that as we get the word out there and as we work with more institutions and more individuals, I am sure that you will find it a very interesting area, and that is something that really impacts us all. Another question we have: has the JPC assessed the level of productivity between rural and urban areas in Jamaica? If yes, what are some of the key findings? Well, the center always has, as I said before, we conduct research right across Jamaica. So in terms of productivity, I see that in terms of productivity, we do look at productivity between the rural and the urban areas in Jamaica. In terms, we look at areas like the agriculture, fisheries. We look also on the electricity We'll look at the different utility companies, and we'll look at the various sectors across Jamaica. So whichever sector, some areas may fall within the rural country of the country, and other may look maybe in more urban areas. We do actually look at it. What we find is that a lot of the productivity issues are really centered around the type of industry. So for example, if it is a service industry versus agriculture or that kind of thing. So you may find that there is some correlation in terms of the actual industry. And when we get on to our other session, our research director, Ms. Mikhail Yarcourt, she will give a further answer on this. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Winsome, do we have? Michaela, I don't know if you wanted to come in here.
Hi, good day. So I think that the presentation you made was quite informative. The questions are really good questions, lots of good answers as well. Thanking everyone for tuning in. So we will be having our next session at 11:15. So I still see some questions coming in, Colette.
So are you finished, Michaela?
Well, if you want to go ahead and address the questions, and then I can come back on.
Okay. Someone asked if you're interested in becoming a member of the JPC, what would be the requirement, the procedure to apply? And the person said that they realize it's critical for nation building and they would like to play a part. Okay, well, you're welcome to send in your resume to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and you can address it to Ms. and the HR manager, and you would state in there that you know what you'd like to do and that you'd want to be a part of the JPC, and then we'll take it from there. Are there any other questions, Winsome? All right, well, I must say thank you so much for being a part of our virtual workshop on getting to know the JPC. And I do hope that you have all learned a little bit more about the center. You're welcome to contact us if you have any further questions. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. So thank you again. And I'm going to hand you over now to Michaela.
All right, good morning again, everyone. Thank you, Colette, for presenting on the JPC. It seems the feedback I'm getting is that people now have a better understanding of what the Jamaica Productivity Center is all about. And we do welcome your interest in the center. If you would like to become or are interested in becoming a productivity ambassador, we have a program in which you can contact us, we will prepare you, and you can use whatever your platform is to help us share the message of productivity. This week is our productivity week. It's the first time we've actually had a productivity week, but productivity across the world is celebrated every year on June 20th. This year was on a Sunday, so since we were going to celebrate on a Monday anyway, we decided to just run with it. So we would have had our flagship event yesterday on the 22nd. It was a forum in which we had some presenters from different areas. We had persons from Jamaica Tertiary Commission, from a CARICOM organization called the Caribbean Center for Research, Energy and Energy Efficiency. We had a representative from the Scientific Research Council. We had our very own Colin Turner, who is the head of our Technical Assistance and Services Unit, a unit you'll be hearing more from later on today. And we also had a representative from Simtai Consulting, and we had the CEO of Honeybun on our panel. So if you're interested to hear about the transformative ways in which we can pivot towards a more sustainable, productive future, post-COVID, as we try to recover out of COVID and post-COVID, I would encourage you to visit our YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube, you'll find us at Jamaica Productivity Center, and you can watch that forum from yesterday. It was quite engaging, and we were fortunate to also have Empress as our host. Lots of ideas coming out of it. So you can tune in and then look forward to the future to see how those ideas will be implemented. For the rest of today, we'll be having 2 more sessions. One session will look at the foundations of productivity, where we'll explain the definition of productivity, how it's calculated, why it's important, and the state of productivity in Jamaica. So that starts at 11:15. So I would say stay tuned for that, or you could go take a break, get some water, and then log back in. And then at that session will go up to probably around 11:15, so it goes up to 12:15. And then our final session for the day will start at 12:30 and it will end at 1:30. That session looks at the 5 steps to improving your productivity. And in that session, it will be a practical session that will allow you to understand how you can do your own productivity assessments. So at the JPC, we do professionally do productivity assessments for companies and businesses, and it's a service that's highly regarded and quite valuable. And we're giving you the opportunity to be a part of that process, to learn how you can do an assessment. And once you've done your assessment, you can actually send it into the JPC and you'll get feedback so that we can help you start to be more productive. So I mentioned before, this week is our productivity week, doing what we can to see if we can spread the message of productivity. In leading up to this week, we actually had a productivity innovation competition, and that competition would have allowed us to get some ideas about what people think we can do to build productivity. And our finalists have actually been announced, and the judges are now judging their submission, and we'll have the announcement on Friday. So you can join us on Instagram Live at 2 p.m. where we'll be announcing the winners for that competition, as well as, there's 2 components. So we'll be announcing both sets of winners. And we'll also be having giveaways. So if you like getting stuff or the opportunity to win, I would say make sure you listen into yesterday's forum if you weren't there live, and then tune in on Friday on our Instagram page and our Facebook page for giveaways. So I'm going to leave you and we'll take a break, and then we'll return at 11:15. And this Zoom will remain open. So even if during the break you have some questions, you can feel free to send them in. And then once the next session starts, we can also address those sessions. Thank you for joining in, and please stay tuned.
Good morning, everyone. I know you're all here and listening in, and I have a question for you. So this is going to be a giveaway. I'm Romari. I'm an intern at the JPC. So I hope you're all listening, right? We're here. Are we here? So the first person to actually respond in the chat right now will be getting this giveaway, right? And then we'll have one later on YouTube for persons there. So our question to you is, right? Remember the first one to respond. Our question to you is, name one of the units by the Jamaica Productivity Center. The first one to type in the chat will get this giveaway. I'm seeing some responses, but we still don't have the correct answer as yet or a correct answer. So keep them coming. Guys, I'm feeling nervous for you. Who's going to type the right answer? And I'm sure you're going to love this giveaway. Guys, are you telling me that no one's going to get this prize? Come on, let's name one of the units. Or just have to go and give all of them to the YouTube listeners. Congratulations, all right, you got it. So that's the TASU Technical Assistance Services Unit. So look out for us to contact you. Cool? Good job, and thanks to everyone who gave their responses. Wait a second.
Good morning again, everyone. I think I should start off by saying congratulations to Arlette. So we ask that you send a private message. You can send a private message to Colette Barham so that she can get your details, so that we can make sure you get your prize. We are so excited to have you all with us today. Um, we are going to be now jumping into our second session, in which we will be looking at the foundations of productivity. My name is Michaela Ann Urquhart. I am the Senior Director of Research and Measurement here at the Jamaica Productivity Center. And I will be bringing you through how we measure productivity, why it is important, what productivity is, and then afterwards you'll be able to answer your questions, to get your questions answered about productivity. So we're looking forward to a very engaging session, and I'm hoping that you learn a little bit more and get a great appreciation for what productivity is. Okay, thank you. So I'm back. So today I'm going to be sharing with you about what productivity is. So this morning, Colette would have introduced in the first session for our workshop about the Jamaica Productivity Center. So now I just want to reiterate for those of you who might just be joining in, or for those who didn't get a chance to hear it before, you just don't remember. The Jamaica Productivity Center is a department within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. We are tasked with advocating, measuring, and monitoring national productivity statistics. We also provide policy advice on productivity related issues for our nation. Our vision is for us to allow the Jamaican economy to be more productive, for us to encourage innovation, and for us to be more competitive. And we will do this by offering productivity advocacy. We offer productivity consultancies. We research on issues related to productivity, and we also share and disseminate information related to productivity. So this is a big question, why you're all here today, and the message that we're trying to get across during this productivity week. And that is, what is productivity? Well, when we speak about productivity, we're looking at the efficiency with which people, households, firms, organizations, industries, and the nation convert inputs to outputs. When we're talking about inputs, we're thinking about things like natural resources. So we call that, or we group that in economics as a term called land. We also have labor, and labor refers to our workforce, manpower. So we can think of that in terms of the number of workers or the amount of work performed by an employee. We also think about as inputs capital. So when we talk about capital, we're talking about those tangible things such as tools, machineries, and building that are also a part of the production process. And then we have outputs. And so a lot of times when we think about outputs or production, people immediately go to goods. But when we're talking about outputs, we're also talking about goods and services. And if we're even want to get a little bit more granular or flexible, we can even think of outputs as any intended outcome that we want. So we're looking at productivity, we can actually be looking at productivity at the personal level. So it's possible that, you may not actually be producing a good or service for sale, but you may have an intended result or outcome that you're hoping for. And we can include this in terms of an output for measuring productivity. So it's very important that we drive home the point that productivity is not the same thing as production. So what you'll find is that a lot of times when someone thinks about them being productive, they're saying, well, I'm productive because I'm doing something and I'm engaged in some type of economic activity. And so they're saying that they're being productive. But what they're really doing is that they're producing. Now, we can't talk about productivity without talking about production, but let's examine the difference. So when we think about production, production is about the process of creating your goods and services. And if we stick to the definition that we talked about before, it would be about the production or the creation of goods, services, and then also our intended outcomes. If we are looking at productivity now, the productivity is the efficiency with which we are able to produce these goods and services. So when we think about production, we might be asking a question like, how much output? But if we're talking about productivity, the question we would ask is, how much output can we get given the amount of inputs we've put in? So let's look at some everyday examples or ways in which we actually engage with productivity and we may not even realize it. So it might be a question of whether or not we should use a computer software to record some information for accounting details, or should we have a paper-based, pen and paper-based book ledger where we have to painstakingly do the calculations by hand, right? Every morning when you are deciding how to get to work, whether you're driving or taking public transportation or walking, you have to decide which route will get you there the fastest way. And you have to consider other factors that might be important, for example, road work, traffic, and anything that might interrupt the time in which you actually get to work and the amount of gas that you have to use, or maybe the amount that you have to pay in toll. That's an issue that takes into consideration productivity. Or what about if you have to go to the bank or you have to go to the tax office and you're considering, do I really have to go in person? Maybe I don't have to join that long line. I can just do my transaction online instead, virtually. And that's an issue of productivity as well. We can also think about productivity when we're planning for big events like a wedding or a major party, or even studying for an exam. So when we have these type of things, we have to be realistic, and we also have to be efficient because time is one of the most limited resources that we have, right? Time is, we're always losing time. Right now, sitting here, you're losing time, but I hope you think it's in a good way anyway. But we have to be efficient. We have to be efficient about how we're using our time and be realistic about the amount of time that we have to include in the process. Or it could be as simple as, well, we have to cut down a tree. Should I be using a hacksaw or should I be using an electric saw, right? So those are all some simple ways in which we actually engage with the concept of productivity every day. Now, when we think about improving productivity, because we made that distinction between production and productivity, we want to make sure that we're realizing that improving productivity is not only about increasing production. It's a part of it, but what we're really trying to do is that we're trying to improve our efficiency of production, right? So increasing the rate of efficiency of production. And the idea of improving productivity is that you want to be able to either get more outputs with the same amount of inputs, or you want to be achieving the same amount of outputs using less inputs. And if you look at this picture that we have on the screen here, we have a doctor, a nurse, and maybe an office assistant, and there's one bulb that needs to be changed, and they've torn apart the whole office to try and get it done, right? And then you had one man that came in with the right skills and the right tools, and he was able to reduce the amount of time and the amount of effort that it would take to change that one bulb. So if we see this picture, if you have the wrong persons with the wrong skill sets and you don't have the right tools, you'll see that it's going to take a lot of confusion. It takes a lot of time, as well as they've made a mess. So therefore, it's going to take them some time to clean up that mess. It's going to reduce that, it's going to increase the cost that they have to pay, maybe in terms of cleaning services. It reduces the time that they have to see patients. And so we see that improving productivity can be important, But it's not just about improving output. We want to make sure that we're improving output in a very efficient way. Now, one thing that we do like to say here at JPC is that we want to try and work smarter, not necessarily harder. But, you know, I'm reminded of a colleague that always says that sometimes people like to use that to get out of doing work. So I would drive home the point today that we definitely do want to be working smarter if we're working harder, right? So it's not only about working harder, but we want to make sure that if we're working harder, we're still getting more. We're still getting more output for that work, that extra work that we're putting in. So there's two ways that we can think about increasing output. So in increasing output, we can either choose to increase the amount of inputs, right? Or we can choose to increase the efficiency of production, which, as we now know, that increasing the efficiency of production would be increasing our productivity. The challenge is deciding what we need to do. If we are increasing inputs if we're increasing the inputs in order to get a higher levels or quantity of outputs, what we're going to find that there's actually going to be a cost to doing this. The more inputs we use the higher the cost. So first, we have to think about those dollar costs, or what we call the accounting costs. For every unit that you need extra units of input you need to employ, that's more money out of your budget. So it's either you have to buy more inputs, you have to pay for more labor time, right? Or you have to make more capital investments. The other thing is that it impacts the worker as well. So because now they have to produce more output at the same rate, is going to take them more time. So that means generally society, now we have less time for leisure or doing other activities that we would do if we weren't working. Also, it means that other resources cannot be properly allocated to the production of other goods and services. So there's somewhat of a trade-off. So not only are we trading off our leisure time, but now the other resources, the other goods and services we would like to produce are going to be limited because we're taking labor and other inputs to produce more of this one good or service. Another challenge that we'll face is that it can likely place a strain on our natural resources. So we find that if we need to use more electricity and we have to use more fuel, or we have a process where we need to wash fruits for production, for agro-processing, and we have to use more and more water in order to get the process done, then of course that's putting a strain on our natural resources. So, you know, it comes down to us wanting to take care of all of the aspects of society, take care of our environment, right? And it also is dealing with us protecting our pockets. So the more dollars that we have to invest into putting more into the production of this one good or service means that it's also not only less that we have to contribute to other things in terms of production, but there's less for us to consume. So it's going to kill our purchasing power. However, if we make the decision to increase production by growing our productivity, then what we'll find is that we're now able to allow for our output to grow without having to bear all of those additional costs. And this is beneficial to all of the different entities in society, right? So whether you're an individual, business, or the government. At the individual level, we'll find that this will allow for higher wages without the increase in prices. So there's higher wages that's not accompanied by inflation. You'll also find that because there's that lower unit cost to the manufacturer or to the farm, then they can now pass this and allow for better negotiations for the individuals for their wages. From the business perspective, it would allow them to increase the competitiveness of their operations. And then for policymakers, it will help to create an environment that is more sustainable for economic growth and economic development, and for us to be able to meet the targets that we have in terms of social development as well as economic development. Now, the next thing we want to look at, so now we say that we need to have productivity, or we want to consider productivity, and we want to see if we can grow our production by growing our productivity, not just by increasing our inputs. So the big question, now the next big question is, why is this important? And it's important because when we increase our productivity, we realize now that it's the only way in which we can have economic growth without straining our resources. So it is an opportunity for firms to consider how they can reorganize their business strategies and processes so that they can become more efficient. It means that we're going to have less waste. If you recall the picture with the doctors and the nurses as opposed to the janitor, it allows us to reduce waste in terms of utilizing skills and services for the right areas rather than using talents in the wrong way. It also reduces the amount of time that we spend unnecessarily doing activities or dedicating to the production of things that shouldn't necessarily require as much time. It also allows us to reduce the cost. So there's a reduction in waste in terms of the budget. We also find, and I would have mentioned before, that it's going to allow for economic growth and development. If we want to have sustained growth over time, the only way we can do this is with productivity. Even if you increase your inputs and you have an increase in outputs, that will not translate into a higher GDP for every person in the society. We also mentioned that it would help to promote wages and to increase profits. So it allows firms to be more competitive, and it allows workers to have higher wages and not face higher costs. And we also find that it can improve the health and wellness of our society. So when persons feel that they're being more productive, we have found that it improves their attitude towards the company that they work for. It improves how motivated they are to actually go and do more work as well. And if you are able to be more productive in a short amount of time, then it means you have more time for personal care and for wellness activities. So how do we calculate productivity? Well, the calculation of productivity it sounds very complicated, but it can also be thought of in a very simple way. And it's our outputs divided by our inputs. Said another way, it's our output, it's a ratio of our outputs to our inputs. So when we are able to produce outputs for every unit of input that we have. And there's different types of productivity. So first, we will consider what we call total factor productivity. And total factor productivity means that if we were to look at any production process, whether we're thinking about personal productivity, we're thinking about productivity at the firm level, or we're thinking about productivity at the national level, we would look at all of the outputs, all of our combined outputs, and then we would divide that by all of our combined inputs. So all inputs would include all our intangible as well as tangible inputs. So when we think about our tangible inputs, we're thinking about things such as our labor and our capital, and maybe, our labor and our capital for sure, and as well as our land. When we're thinking about our intangible inputs, we might be thinking about things like our management practices. So those are things that are a bit harder to quantify. We can't touch those things, right? But they make a difference in terms of our productivity. So we would consider all of those things in total factor productivity. Now we can also look at multi-factor productivity. Now, if you have been doing any research or you plan to do any research on productivity, you will find that in many instances, total factor productivity and multi-factor productivity are often considered to be the same thing. Now, if we truly had to make a distinction between the two, a multi-factor productivity would be looking at our total outputs, but then comparing them to some combination of our inputs. And what you'll find is that multi-factor productivity then would be easily captured if we know what all of our inputs are, if we can clearly identify what they are. So if we can clearly identify the intangible ones and the tangible ones, then we might find that our multi-factor productivity in its truest form could be equal to our total factor productivity. Now, however, we then have finally our partial factor productivity. Partial factor productivity is probably the type of productivity that's easiest to calculate and the easiest to wrap our mind around. So when we're looking at partial factor productivity, we're looking at our total output divided by a specific input. So the common ones that we know and we use here at the JPC for looking at national statistics are our labor productivity and our capital productivity. So in looking at our labor productivity, we're looking at the total volume or even value of output that's produced per unit of labor given over a particular period of time. So we might be interested in doing this analysis annually, or we might be looking at it over a quarter. When we think about labor productivity, we're actually realizing that we're getting a good estimate of how we can gauge the health of our overall economy. And this is because we find that there's lots of correlations or similarities between our GDP or our real value added per person and our output per worker. So those are closely linked in society. When we think about trying to improve labor productivity, so we want to be able to improve the amount that each worker is being able to produce, we might be thinking about things like improving working conditions, right? So a happy worker is a better worker, we hope. We also want to make sure that we have up-to-date labor practices that are understood by our labor force. We want to have technology, we want to be able to adopt technology that complements our labor force in the specific way that it's being used, and that the technology is understood by the labor force, and that it's being adopted in an appropriate way and in a timely way as necessary. And we also realize that we can use our other inputs more efficiently in order to help improve how our labor force is utilized. So how do we specifically calculate labor productivity here at the Jamaica Productivity Center? Well, in a very basic sense, what we're looking at is we're looking at the real value added, and that is divided by the average employed labor force. And that's if we're looking at it over a period of a year. So if we have labor productivity, we have our real gross domestic product. This is information that data that we're able to get from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. And the Statistical Institute of Jamaica also produces on a quarterly basis statistics for the number of persons that are employed and are a part of our labor force. So anyone who is in the labor force anyone in the labor force are those persons who are either working or actively seeking jobs over the age of 14. And if those persons are actually employed, then they are counted within the employed labor force. So if they're actually working, engaged in some type of economic activity, they're included in the labor force. We take those quarterly statistics for the year. So we would have for the period January to March, and then April to June, July to September, October to December. And we would take an average of those in order for us to get an average of the employed labor force for the year, which would be the period of interest. And we would, after doing some other intermediate calculations, look at how we're comparing our output per worker, which is a comparison of our GDP to each worker. And that's how we calculate our labor productivity. Now, if we look at labor productivity in a more global sense, you'll find that this is probably the most common way in which labor productivity is assessed, in part because the data is easy to come across, and it's also easy to compare across countries. You will also find that we will also look at other measures, which would include looking at our real gross value added divided by the number of hours worked. So while the calculation, the first calculation that's there on the screen underneath the blue heading would allow us to look at how much each worker each year contributes to the economy or the production in the economy. The calculation underneath the green is actually allowing us to look at how much output each worker is, how much output we get from every hour that a worker works. So the next thing we can look at is our capital productivity. So capital productivity is also one of what we call our partial factor productivity measures. When we're looking at capital productivity here at the JPC, what we're looking at is real value added divided by our net capital stock. And we are able to assess or obtain the information, or calculate, I should say, the information for our net capital stock from information from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, again, in which we're looking at gross capital formation. And as we go forward, we'll actually be able to look and see how we can actually disaggregate these different calculations. So if we look at labor productivity that has been calculated or estimated by the Jamaica Productivity Center, we find that when we look at the period from 2000 to 2009, that this graph here actually shows that our labor productivity is actually declining over time. So if we look at 2000, for instance, we see that each person or each employed worker would have contributed or produced approximately $600,000 towards output, right? And then if we look at 2019, each worker would have been contributing approximately $535,000 towards output in our economy. Now, over time, what we've seen is that our labor productivity has been declining, and we can attribute this decline to a matter of the comparisons of the different elements in that ratio that we identified before. So remember, we're looking at our outputs over our inputs. Our output in this case, we said, was our real value added, and our inputs in this case was the number of workers. Over this period of time, what we've been seeing is that there has been an increase in the size of our employed labor force. But while our labor force has been increasing, we find that our GDP, the rate at which our GDP is growing, is pretty much anemic. So it's usually ranging somewhere about from 0 to, dare I say, 2%, right? So we have very weak growth, but we've had strong gains in total in the employment of labor. So even when we look at productivity, having a session like this, we find it to be so important because it's very easy generally for people to understand the fact that, okay, unemployment is shrinking. It's easy for a person to say, okay, unemployment is shrinking, but then also GDP is very weak. But we often don't make the connection about why those two are both, how those two rely on each other, right? So with this weakening in productivity, on average, we're seeing an annual decline of approximately 0.6%. So while we do look at national statistics for our labor productivity, so that's looking at our economy as a whole, so we look at all of our total gross domestic product, we also consider calculating it by sector, so the goods sector and the services sector. But we can also break it down according to the different industries. If I can go back, there was a question in our earlier session where someone actually asked if we looked at rural versus urban productivity. That is not a regular statistic that we actually look at in at the JPC. Is it possible? Is it potentially possible to look at some of the information? It would first, of course, be dependent on us being able to get a breakdown for the data for output by rural and urban sectors, right? So it's not data that we collect right now. But as Mrs. Barham would have indicated, we do look at the different industries, and there are some industries that might be more heavily weighted. For instance, agriculture tends to be a lot more heavily weighted in terms of production in the rural areas, but it's not a truly rural urban disaggregation. So what you're looking at, these numbers to the right of the graph are actually looking at the rate of increase of productivity annually over the same period of time. So if we look at 2000 to 2019, the average rate at which labor productivity would have changed for each of these industries are shown here. So what you will find is that generally we might have low labor productivity for areas such as agriculture, forestry, and fishery, but it tends to be growing a lot higher than some of our other industries. Then you have other industries such as electricity and water supply that tend to have very strong labor productivity, but also have higher rates of growth in labor productivity. And we'll see this to be true in part because areas such as electricity and water supply are able to increasingly use more capital and more technology in order to improve the efficiency at which their workers are able to work, right? So this kind of just gives you a snapshot of where we are in terms of the different industries. Then we can focus our attention to trends in capital productivity. When we look at capital productivity over time, just as a reminder, our capital productivity is our real value added as over our net capital stock. And so that's looking at the investments that are made for fixtures, buildings, and tools, and that contribute towards the production process. And so what we see is that our capital productivity has been fluctuating, but for a number of years over this period, which is 2000 to 2019, we still see that our capital productivity has been declining. So if you see any points that fall underneath the zero line, that's telling us that we're having that capital productivity actually fell in that year compared to the previous year. And what would drive this is that we would have increases in our gross capital formation and thus our net capital stock that are not being matched again or not being realized when we look at changes in our economic growth. So our output is while we're investing more in capital, but it's not being matched by what we see in terms of our outputs. Now we can also compare what our productivity is like here in Jamaica compared to other countries. And what we'll find is that we tend to have low growth. We have low productivity growth, actually declining productivity, where other countries, some might be declining, but we're declining at such a much faster rate. So if you look at the chart to the left, where we see the labor productivity growth in the Caribbean from 2000 to 2009. So that's if we look at 2000 as a start point and 2019 as the end point, then what we find is that labor productivity for Jamaica has been declining, or it has declined by 15% compared to somewhere like the Dominican Republic, where we see that it has actually increased by 51%. If we turn our attention to the graph to the right, which actually looks at annual labor productivity growth across the Caribbean for each year, we can see that Trinidad and the Dominican Republic has a healthy rate of productivity growth over the whole period, also shows significant increases in labor productivity annually over the period. And that red line that we see there is Jamaica, that has been declining. So looking a little bit broader, we kind of look at labor productivity for Jamaica. Again, if you're looking now at a decade, so we start 2010, we go to 2019. Again, we see that we were experiencing negative labor productivity changes compared to other countries such as the US, UK, even Barbados and Dominican Republic that had positive growth. What's important about this is that our productivity rates can often be an indication for what we call cyclical changes in our economy. So what will happen is that normally if there's an increase in our productivity, we normally expect to see that our economy will then start to grow or have an environment of supportive growth. But if we have a decline in our productivity, we're actually going to see a weakening in our, we call it a weakening in our economic growth. Now we turn our attention to total factor productivity. Total factor productivity at the JPC, because we mentioned that there are some elements in addition to labor and capital that we may not be able to easily calculate or to estimate, such as research and development or management practices. We may not be able to quantify those in terms of costs or numbers. And so because of that, when we're looking at total factor productivity, we actually measure the change in the rate of total factor productivity. And so in order to get that estimate, what we are actually doing is that we're looking at how effective these other things that we can't necessarily measure are able to allow our capital and labor to be more productive. So in essence, what we have is that the growth rate of our total factor productivity is what we call a residual, or the difference of the changes in output or changes in productivity that are not attributed directly to labor or to capital. So again, we see that Jamaica has been experiencing on average negative total factor productivity changes as compared to other countries that may have been experiencing some amount of growth. In the region, in Latin America, we see that they too have been experiencing negative growth. But as you can see, for a lot of the developed countries and developing Asia that tend to have high rates of economic growth, we see that their total factor productivity is actually positive. And one of the common trends that we'd also see is that total factor productivity tends to be closely correlated in Jamaica and elsewhere to economic growth. So where we see the economy growing, we'll also see our total factor productivity increasing. And generally, when we see a decline in the rate of total factor productivity, we also expect to see that our economic growth is going to be falling. So as we mentioned, Jamaica is kind of in this state where we have the potential to do better and we are falling below the world. But we did identify that over the last few years, there have been changes in the global economy in which labor productivity has generally been falling, especially for a lot of the developed countries. And some of this might be affected by natural plateaus in terms of the obtainment of human capital, as well as the ability to diversify, the ability to diversify in terms of trade, diversify in terms of production, diversify in terms of the type of value of goods that are being produced. We also see changes in terms of the demographics across the world. So we now have older and older persons being in the labor force. People are having less children, so that has implications for how much labor we have access to. There have also been some issues historically, or some factors historically that have impacted the trends in productivity. For example, the global financial sector crises would have also had a major impact in terms of slowing down rates of productivity. And so what you would have seen is that would have hampered a lot of productivity growth in the developed world. And you would have seen some amount of uptake after or in the recovery process for a lot of the developing countries that weren't actually realized for developed countries. So I want to definitely leave some time for questions. If you have any questions, you can indicate by raising your hand. You can also put the questions in the text and we'll try to address as many of them as we can. Okay, so in the meantime, while we wait to see if anyone has any questions, I just want to remind you that if you have questions in terms of what the Jamaica Productivity Center does, about maybe getting some information from our research or calculations or statistics, you can contact us. We're very easy to get to. You can get to us by phone. Our number is 922-1598. You can email us at jpc at mlss.gov.jm. You can find us on Facebook, Jamaica Productivity Center, on Instagram at Jamaica Productivity, and on Twitter at ProductivityJA. And this session, when this session is finished, we'll have one final session or one workshop for today, and that workshop will start at 12:30. That workshop would look at improving your productivity, the 5 steps. So our technical services, technical assistance services unit will be presenting some techniques that you can use to improve productivity in your personal lives or in your companies. And it will give you the opportunity to do your own personal productivity assessments and to send those into the JPC for some feedback. So I have a question here, and the question says, how does assigning a value to leisure time factor into assessing overall levels of productivity? So if we're talking about leisure time, well, when we talk about time, we, as in economics, we normally measure time in 2 ways. It's either using your time for work or for leisure. So if you're not working, then it's leisure time. So if we're looking at the number of hours worked, as the number of hours worked increases, then your leisure time is going to decrease. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that at the JPC, we would have mentioned, and Mrs. Barham in the earlier session would have mentioned that one of the goals that we have at the Productivity Center is to help people understand productivity. And another thing is to actually understand what people know about productivity. And so to help us do this, we actually have a survey, a productivity perception survey. And we would like for you to take some time and participate in the survey. You'd be contributing to nation building and national statistics. So if you could just take some time and do the survey is going to be, has been shared in the chat, and we'll keep sharing it throughout the session. All right, so we don't have any other questions. So I think if I could probably expand some more on the question about leisure time, we can also think of leisure time as time for persons to be able to recoup. As it is right now, we don't have an official statistics or official statistic for looking at leisure time, or we don't do that now at the JPC. But what we realize is that leisure time factors into health and wellness, and that factors into the state of the human capital. So that's how well a person is going to be able to be educated, as well as how well they're going to be, or how they will not be sick so that they can work, right? And so that impacts how well they can work. So there's a question that says, are there any past policies in Jamaica that can help address slower productivity gains? So if I am interpreting this question correctly, it seems like the question is asking if there's policies that have actually contributed to why we are producing, why our productivity is low. Now, what's important to understand about productivity is that there's so many different facets to it, and there's so many different ways in which it can be hampered or improved. So we're talking everything from how difficult it is probably in order to start a business, how competitive your environment is, how much traffic is on the road, what type of transportation networks exist in order to transport goods and services. We're talking about educational systems. We're talking about cultural attitudes, and we're talking about what people know and understand about productivity. So in a nutshell, I guess is to say that in any policy in which we have not actually prioritized or productivity was not prioritized is actually going to create problems for productivity improvement. So if the policy is related to trying to reduce unemployment and we're not thinking about how unemployment is going to be reduced while increasing economic growth, that can be a problem. If we're talking about building new transportation networks and we have not considered if those transportation networks are going to reach persons in the rural area who need to transport their goods, or whether or not it's going to reduce traffic, then that could be an issue. So it's also thinking about if we are supporting educational programs and the educational programs that we support don't lead to us having the skills that we need, that the work that the employers need in order to get the work done, then that in itself can be a problem. So it's not simply to say that there's one particular policy that is driving growth. I think that just over time, there just needs to be more emphasis on prioritizing how productivity is including in all of our policies. Okay, so I think somebody has their hand up. Can you tell me the name of the person? So Nicola Thomas, if you are able to talk, if you're able to open your mic, you can. If not, then you can go ahead and place your question in the chat. All right, so I see another question coming in. It says, what would it take to fundamentally transform productivity and growth patterns to dramatically increase quality job creation in Jamaica over the next decade? That is an excellent question. And on that question, I would definitely plug our forum from yesterday. We had a lot of industry professionals, and this is both public and private sector, who discussed this. I would also encourage you to take some time to look at some of our past forums where we look at other specific issues. And you can find these forums on our Jamaica Productivity Center. So if we are definitely trying to transform an economy, we have to focus on things like definitely focus on education. We have to focus on measuring better ways to measure and to research about productivity. It would be good to have more firm level information, to have more firms recording and sharing information on their levels of productivity. We would want to have benchmark tools that are going to be used to assess productivity, because the very first thing we have to do in terms of trying to understand how we can grow our productivity is to make sure that we have very good measures of calculating and monitoring our productivity over a period of time. So it would definitely be in terms of encouraging more businesses and persons to consider and to measure their productivity. It would be about making sure that we have the right skill sets so that we can reduce the amount of turnover in jobs or persons working in jobs that either don't live up to their qualifications or jobs in which they're not qualified to do. We'd also want to make sure that we are finding ways to prioritize productivity in the development of businesses. We want to have more application of innovation. We want to have more research and development that is applied. We want to see the ways in which we can make sure that we are adopting technology at a faster rate and in a way that is appropriate for our economy and for the businesses that we have. And we would also want to see what we need to do in order to reallocate our resources. So a big thing about productivity is efficiency. So if your resources are not being properly used or being put to the areas that have high value production that can actually support productivity improvements, then that will be a likely issue. So the question is that when we have productivity improvements and if our economy is doing better, then that in itself will be improving job creation. And another point I would just want to point out on the issue of job creation is that, from a different standpoint, when jobs are created, educational institutions and so on need to take note in terms of what are the types of jobs that are being created and what are the skills that are needed for those jobs. So again, I just want to remind you that we are here because this is one of our activities for our Productivity Week. We had a forum yesterday. I encourage you to watch that forum on our Jamaica Productivity Center YouTube page. You can also watch it at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security YouTube page. You can follow us at JPC. You can follow us at Jamaica Productivity on Instagram and at Productivity JA on Twitter. We are having our Productivity Week ends on Friday, and on Friday you can tune in for more giveaways. So you would have gotten a taste of our giveaway today. And again, congratulations to our winner, Arlette. I hope that you have made contact with Colette Farm so we can get your information so we can make arrangements for you to get your prize. Are there any other questions? All right, so again, stay tuned. Our next session is going to start at 12:30. It's another time you can probably go grab a quick lunch, come right back, settle in for a very informative discussion about what you can do practically to improve your productivity on a daily basis or in your firm or company. And remember, this is an opportunity for you to get advice and information that companies have to pay big top dollars for, right? So, and you can actually get feedback from the JPC. If you are listening in and you're interested in actually helping us spread the message about productivity, we recommend that you contact us. We have a productivity ambassador program in which we will be willing to train and work with you to help spread that message of productivity. We also would encourage you to help us by doing our productivity perception survey. And then I think later on, we'll also be having links to our productivity gap analysis survey. So we'd love for you to take part in that as well. You can tune in on Instagram Live Friday at 2:00 to see the winners of our our very first productivity innovation competition. The submissions were great. I think you'd be really interested to see who the winners are. And just tune in on our social media pages to make sure that you're up to date with all of our activities and all of the good things that we have planned going forward. So thank you for joining on the session. I hope that you all will stick around for 12:30. See you soon.
A message brought to you by the Jamaica Productivity Center, a department of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
All right, pleasant good afternoon to everyone joining us this afternoon for our third and final session in our series today of workshops commemorating our celebrations for World Productivity Week. So this afternoon, the presentation or the discussion will be centered around improving productivity, the 5 steps. So my name is Jonathan Isaacs. I'm the Senior Productivity Specialist here at the Jamaica Productivity Center. I'm attached to the Technical Assistance Services Unit. And the team that will be presenting and sharing with you today include Brittany Johnson, who is our Research Officer, and Sean Smith, who is a part of our technical team as well. So we will be sharing with you just 5 steps in terms of how you can improve your productivity. Hopefully, this session will be very interactive and you'll be able to learn from us and likewise ourselves learning from you based on your questions and so on. So as we proceed, we are looking at the objectives of this session today. So the overview, we'll have some objectives. We'll have an icebreaker. Introduction to productivity. So we look at why it is important, the benefits, what is productivity, the 5S method, and finally we look at, in general, the overall 5S and implementing. And finally, the 5S will provide a productivity toolkit for you to do a 5S assessment, and that will be done outside of today's proceedings, but we'll certainly be guiding you through what is expected read that activity. So in terms of our objectives, today we want to introduce you to the 5S productivity tool as a means of improving operational efficiency, to provide practical examples that can be applied in day-to-day activities within different industries. So we are aware that there might be a mix of persons from different industries. So wanted to share with you a tool that we found or we find to be useful across different industries. And this is certainly something that we've applied ourselves. And finally, to provide a simple productivity toolkit, which will allow participants to conduct self-assessment using the 5S technique. So we want you to engage in this. We don't want it to just be a situation where we are telling you something, but we want you to actually apply it in that regard. All right, so we're now at the point of our icebreaker. And if you look quickly in your chat, you will notice that there is a link that you can click on, right? So you will see this link popping up in the chat, and you can all click on that link, and you will be able to just quickly answer these 2 questions that are showing on the screen. So I'll actually be sharing a screen with you which populates the answers as we go along. So in the chat, you'll see the link. So you can just click on that link and it will take you to the screen. So as you populate your answers, it will pop up on the screen. My persons are saying they're not seeing the link. Anybody seeing it now? Anybody can confirm that they're seeing it? So we'll just give about maybe 2 to 3 minutes for persons to be able to answer these 2 quick questions, and then we'll move on. All right, so I'm seeing some answers coming in. So I'm just going to share with you so you can see as well. So some persons are saying output and efficiency comes to mind when they think of productivity. Any other feedback? Any other feedback from anybody else before we move on? All right, so just in the interest of time, if you have any feedback on any of these 2 questions, you could type it in the chat as well, and we will certainly be able to view that. For the other question, what comes to mind when you hear the term 5S? So what is it that comes to your mind? 5S, maybe that's a new term for some of you. Maybe that's something that you've heard before. What comes to mind? Again, if you are unable to use the Mentimeter, you can type it in the chat. We'll be able to see it in that regard. So we'll give another minute and then we'll move on. Five S, so the term 5S, what comes to mind? All right, so persons are typing in the chat, productivity strategies. All right, cool. All right, so we're going to press ahead in the interest of time. So we're going to go back to the main presentation. So basically, we will start off with looking at why is productivity so important? So productivity is something that offers several benefits we typically look at it from 3 levels. So the national level, the level of businesses, and us as individuals. So those are typically the three levels that we look at productivity. Here depicted in this picture, you can see what appears to be 3 persons. One is busy pulling ahead what appears to be a cart with squared wheels. And one of them is offering a suggestion with round wheels to say, okay, maybe he's suggesting to use that. But one of the guys is saying, no, thanks, he's not interested in that. And the other one says they're too busy. So what in this picture, what it is really depicting is just showing us that sometimes we think we're being productive. We're maybe working hard, we're putting out a lot of effort, but then are we doing it in the most efficient and effective way, right? So some of the benefits that productivity offers us include For example, higher standard of living for us as individuals, improved standard of living, profitability, business growth, customer satisfaction, competitiveness. And certainly one of the things with productivity is that it's a multifaceted discipline. So it just does not look at the empirical side of it. It also takes into consideration the aspect on the softer side. So it also boosts your morale, right? So when we look at productivity, there are two main ingredients that we want to look at. So the effectiveness component of it and the efficiency component. So doing the right things and doing things right. Now, in the previous picture that we looked at where we saw the guys pushing that cart ahead, yes, we could maybe argue that they were maybe doing the right thing in terms of pushing that cart. Maybe they got an instruction to move the cart from one end to the other end. So maybe they were doing the right thing. But certainly they were not being efficient because they were using squared wheels to propel something. And we know that it doesn't take rocket science for us to understand that moving something on squared wheels, it will be very difficult, right? So in terms of a formal definition for productivity, it's how efficiently we convert our inputs into outputs. And it's usually expressed as a ratio of what you get out in the form of end products or value added. And that ratio is compared to what you put in, which is basically your input. So for example, your labor. So if you have human resources, raw materials, and for various businesses, whether it's in the service industry or the manufacturing industry, those raw materials may vary, and other resources as well, right? So in terms of a formula, we look at it as productivity is equal to output divided by your input. And that is essentially what we look at in terms of what an introduction to productivity is all about. So Brittany Johnson, my colleague now, will take you into the specifics of the whole 5S methodology. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, participants. So we move right into 5S. So, we saw in the chat where some persons seem to have some idea about what 5S is. Some persons may not know what 5S is. So today we're going to look at what it is and how it can be applied across different industries. Now, the 5S method can be considered a lean way of maximizing efficiency within different organizations. So we're gonna look at this quick video so you can have a little summary of what it is, and then we will go further into breaking it down. All right, so the first thing we're gonna look at is the link between productivity and 5S. So 5S does a lot of things for your productivity. Firstly, it increases your safety, safety of others, safety for yourself, safety for the tools that you're using. It improves the quality of work that is produced. It also improves the quality of the environment within which you work. So an environment that is productive is going to be more conducive to somebody coming in and doing their work properly and effectively. Equipment life. So once you're productive and you're using the 5S techniques, you find that your equipment is going to last a bit longer because you're taking more care of that equipment. Better use of floor space. So organization is key. That was said earlier. So the way how you set up your workspace, it could be in the manufacturing industry, even in your own house right now, we're doing remote working based on how you set up your workspace. That can have an impact in increasing your productivity and morale and staff involvement. Now, on the downside, well, not on the downside actually, but it helps to decrease waste overall. And that's something that we're going to look into. It decreases the risk of injuries, underutilized workers. So when you have things laid out the way they're supposed to, persons know their responsibility and their roles, so you have no floating workers within your organization. It decreases inefficient work routines. As I said earlier, you know what you're supposed to be doing, so everything runs smoothly and as it's supposed to. It decreases energy costs. Now, when we let's look at, you have a printer. When you don't take care of that printer, you know that it's gonna start taking up a lot more energy. Certain equipment, if they're not serviced regularly, they will start to pull more energy for you. So that's more costs in terms of energy when you're looking at bills that you have to pay. That's more cost in terms of fixing these equipments later down the line, and it helps to decrease turnaround time. So when you're productive, your work is gonna come out effectively and efficiently time-wise. Now, we spoke about waste. When you're applying 5S, you should always remember that you're trying to get rid of waste in and of itself. And there are 8 main forms of waste: overproduction, excessive inventory, inappropriate or non-value added processing, waiting time, transportation, unnecessary motion, defects, and untapped employee creativity or potential. So let's break down 5S. Now, 5S comes from the Japanese. It's a group of Japanese words that are used to describe, the process for organizing your workspace. It doesn't have to be inside the office, but it's just for organization purposes of your workspace. Now, I don't speak Japanese, so I cannot pronounce these. So we're going to use the English version so they're easier to remember. Sort, straighten or set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. Now, sort, this is the first S. You use this S to remove unused and unusable materials. You clear away the clutter, the products that aren't working properly. You try to clean up the crowded areas, and you remove all those tools and materials that are sitting idle and basically have no purpose at that time. So how can we apply this? Take some before photos of the space, and then you can separate what you want from what you don't want into different zones and sections. And then you would have a designated date and time for cleaning and sorting. So for example, in the office, Fridays could be your cleaning and sorting. You close maybe half an hour early, and everybody takes their time to sort out their desk, clear their out trays, reorganize, things of that nature. And here we have some photos that show you the ways in which you can sort. And to your top left corner, even your closet can be sorted, things of that nature. So it doesn't apply only to the manufacturing industry, it applies within our daily lives. Second S, set in order. And the most famous saying for this step, a place for everything and everything in its place. The idea behind putting things in order is so that you're able to know where everything is, and it makes for smooth operations. Now, some of us have this theory that you work in an organized mess. So if somebody comes and clean it up, you may not know where it is, but if you clean it up, set everything in order, it takes less energy to search for things. Things are in reach. You're not wasting any time, any excessive motion. We spoke about that earlier, things of that nature. So how do we apply the set in order step? You identify all materials, your equipment, your tools by name, number. You can color code them, other types of labeling. And then you design the storage space so that everything is where it's supposed to be, depending on how many times per day or week you use it. So it depends on frequency of usage. And then you would establish a method for storage. So you pick and place something and you align it based on its purpose. And here are some more examples. Now, for top left corner, we see where these things are set in order based on color, maybe based on shape. They're also labeled. Now, what I want you to do is to put in the chat for me some problems that you might run into from that picture. I'm just gonna give you about a minute and a half. Let us know what might be some problems that you might face. Okay, circular objects rolling off the table. That's a good one. Any others? What does that speak to? Doing okay. But what's a problem here? Okay. All right. So one of the attendees spoke to circular objects rolling off the table. So one thing that we have to remember is while we're doing our 5S principles and applying them, safety is a big part of it. So while you have your circular objects on the top, maybe they need to be at the bottom. These bigger objects, heavier objects, that green object might seem very heavy. So maybe that needs to be on the bottom shelf for safety purposes. Remember, we're trying to avoid injuries also. But thank you for your participation. Okay, our third S is shine. Everybody is a janitor. And I know persons always say, you know, I didn't come to work to clean. But guess what? A clean workspace makes for productivity. When you clean all of your devices and your equipment, and you make sure that they're not dirty or damaged, makes for a good environment, higher performance in productivity and quality. And guess what? When you clean some of these equipment and tools, you realize that you can repurpose them to add value somewhere else that it would not have added value for. So, application of this. Take the devices, machineries, and have them maintained according to a schedule. Regularly clean things, make sure they shine bright, your computer screens, your floors, your counters, even those ceiling fans. Remember, those ceiling fans need to be cleaned. Your AC ducts need to be cleaned because guess what? Health is wealth. Health affects productivity. And when you have the dust and persons have sinus and asthma, and then you trigger all of that, the person cannot be productive. Protect the items with cases, folders, protective plastics, things of that nature. When things get broken, fix them immediately. And when you're cleaning, pay attention to the things that you need, you don't need. If it cannot be repurposed, you get rid of it. And here are some pictures. So you make sure that your cleaning objects are in reach. You make sure there's a schedule for your cleaning. All right, fourth S, standardize. Now, an appropriate work standard leads to better employee performance, higher quality, and higher productivity. So how can we apply standardized principle? Define regularly used processes that are routine for you and make it into a standard SOP, standard operating procedures. Standardize your work schedule to possess some level of uniformity so everybody knows what they're doing, what process they're to follow in this circumstance, etc. Define the minimum quality of the things you want to achieve and work to maintain that standard or above it, never below it. And in everything you do, follow the highest standard possible. And standardization looks at labeling and signage, things on your walls that remind you of the goal and the vision and certain of the processes as well. So for example, your top left corner looks at a Gantt chart. It's an example of a Gantt chart that a lot of organizations use. You look at the task, you can track your task, status of completion, things of that nature. Your bottom left looks at signage, things that you can post in and around your office space or even at home. In this pandemic now, signage is very important for your wearing of masks, sanitizing, social distancing. That's a form of standardization. And then you have your timetables to track activities. Now our last S, sustain, sustenance. We're cultivating proper habits so that you can propagate and you can spread and you can perpetuate what you're doing, your routine. Sustenance looks at and sustaining looks at personal productivity management, training to make sure that what are we doing right? What can be fixed? How can we go about, switching up things if that needs to be the case? So applying, automatically do things without procrastinating and embrace setting high standards. Developing a team-centric approach to create a culture of initiative and responsibility. As I said before, performing regular monitoring and evaluation to maintain a standard of improvement and efficiency, and staying disciplined. Stay disciplined, your organization will proudly shine, being tidy and organized. And so here are some of the ways in which you can sustain, your workplace. 5S audit scorecard. You can audit your own workspace to make sure that things are in order and they're up to date with at least 3 of the 5 S's. Make your rules, your evaluation forms, things of that nature. Now, all we're here talking about 5S, a lot of persons have common misconceptions about what 5S is. The first, 5S is all about cleaning, and it's basically housekeeping on steroids. I know we talked about cleaning up your workspace a lot. The truth is, it's a very tiny part of what 5S is. 5S is very multifaceted, and it goes in and out. It interweaves a mindset with a practical process to assist creating culture and increasing discipline in an organization and its individuals. 2, workspaces are all the same, and therefore 5S must be applied in the same way across all spaces. The truth is, workspaces should be set up and organized for those who will actually be using the areas. So apply 5S to your area the way how it fits. It's not a one size fit all. The theory is for you to apply it to your specific area. So if John works in manufacturing, how John applies 5S may not be the same as how Mary would apply 5S who works in a service producing organization. 3, 5S means just throwing out expensive stuff without reason. That is not true, guys. That is not true. The truth is, things should only be kept if they are of value to the organization and the process and the outcome that you're working towards. And remember, when you sort and set in order and shine and standardize, remember, a lot of these things can be repurposed. So you don't necessarily have to throw everything away. You just need to make sure everything has a place and everything is in its place. Now, when we look at implementing a 5S program, the first thing you need to do is set up a 5S committee, select the workspace, the target workspace, which workspace you think needs the 5S intervention the most. Establish a schedule, announce a start date, learn the 5S principles, which you're doing now, apply the 5S principles, and then you check and action. Pretty simple. Now, how do you effectively maintain 5S in various industries? You look at management support, tours of departments, updated training, which is very essential, progress audits, and evaluations of performances. And that is the end of our breakdown of 5S. Now, just remember that this is just an introduction. 5S can go as deep as you wish for it to go, depending on what you wish to achieve. But just for today's session, we're just giving you an introduction to 5S. Now, Sean is gonna take us through a little activity about 5S.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I just realized that my mic was not on. However, my name is Sean Smith, and as I was saying before, the presentation has been very much informative so far. And here at JPC, we see it as our need and our responsibility to educate as much as we can as it relates to productivity and taking productive measures. So basically, we're here having all the fun, but at the same time, we see the need to engage you, our valued audience. So what we have done, we have created an activity, and this activity comes in the form of a self-assessment. And in this assessment, we hope for you guys to at least select a suitable workspace within your organization, within your setting, within your home, whatever suits the situation that best defines you. And after you select that workspace, we want you to apply the principles that we brought to your attention not long ago. So we want you to put everything in practice, not just digest the content, but we want you to apply it as well. So whenever you apply the content, we know that here at JPC, our work is being carried out, so we're educating people so that productivity can be stretched out on a wider scale. All right, so what you should do as well is to take pictures of the surrounding, and you'll be asked to take pictures before the application of the 5S principle as well as after. So what we have for you is that we have provided a productivity toolkit. A link will be sent in the chat. So from that link,
you will be able to click on the link and go directly to the productivity toolkit. And that toolkit entails all the necessary information / procedures that will be necessary for successful completion of the assessment. So what we'll want you to do is to successfully implement these 5S principles within your workspace. And after you have done that, you will give us a feedback by sending us your pictures and videos, which speaks to the scenario or the workspace before and after, so that we can see the progress that has been made as a result of this implementation. So basically, whenever we bring this to you, we bring it to you for the purpose of you learning about it. And as you learn, you can share it with others. And that is how productivity is essential, not just to us as entities, but to the wider society, to Jamaica at large. So we really want you guys to participate in this activity. It is going to be beneficial to us all. So try your very best in order to access the content and give us your feedback so that we can see that everything that has been brought to you is indeed brought forward in a manner that is effective, and then productivity on a whole can be increased worldwide, globally, whichever way you want to speak of it. So again, if there are any challenges, our contact information will be provided so that if you need clarification on anything as it relates to completing the assessment, you can reach out to us and we will give you all the necessary guidelines, all the necessary clarification. So basically, as I said before, the toolkit will provide all the instructions, all the necessary procedures that you will need in order to successfully complete this toolkit. All right, so basically I'll move back to Mr. Jonathan Isaacs, who will further clarify some matters for you. All right, thanks much.
Great. So thank you, Sean. Just for clarity, guys, as it relates to the productivity toolkit, so don't be frightened if you're noticing that when you click on the link, it requires access. Actually, that is something that we are actually going to work on in terms of, so you can still use that link, but we will allow you access. Another thing as well, just to ensure that all the participants are able to get the link, this specific link. I know we've been speaking about a lot of links, but just work with us. The specific link for the productivity toolkit. What we're going to request of all the participants today is that if you don't mind, even quickly right now, just type in your name and your email address. So that way we'll be guaranteed that you'll be able to get the required information to execute that aspect of the exercise. So as I started out earlier, when I started out, I would have shared with you that today will not be just about what we are presenting only, but also it includes the delivery of, and a part of the component is for you to actually execute the learnings then, so to speak, that you would have gained from this. So I'm just going to ask, to just quickly type your names and if you want to type the organization you're representing, and most importantly, an email address that we can send the link to as well. Now that we're basically through the presentation, I'm going to redo an earlier exercise with you guys. So I'm going to again post the link I posted earlier. Now that you've gone through, so the two questions still remain. What does productivity mean to you? And what comes to mind when you hear 5S? So I'll share the link again, and you can just quickly answer those questions, and I'll share the screen for you to see, for everyone to see actually some of the responses. All right, so I'll give you guys just quickly 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes again, just to answer those two questions. So just click on the link, the one that is saying www.mentimeter.com, and then we can quickly go. All right, so just click on the link, type your responses, and we will we will share with you. So in a short while, when the 2 minutes has ended, we'll share with you quickly what persons are thinking based on those 2 questions. All right. All right, so I'm going to share the screen with you guys now. So when we ask the question, what does productivity mean to you? Persons said that it means efficiency, improvements, and output. Quite accurate. And when asked, what comes to mind when you hear the term 5S? Persons were saying speed. Somebody said sustaining. Somebody said productivity, strategy, order, safety, sort, well, salary. That's a good S. Right. So I just wanted to kind of share back with you guys this aspect of the exercise, because I think some persons were saying they weren't seeing the link and so on. So we just wanted to ensure that you were all able to see that. All right. So there are a couple of things that we want to highlight. So one, as I mentioned, please just quickly share your name and an email address in the chat. The link for the productivity toolkit will, if not here in the chat, we will ensure that that is emailed to you, because this is a very, very important part of the exercise. And finally, in terms of our assessment, so we want to know how we deliver to you. We can't call ourselves the productivity center and not continuously improve. And so as part of that, we'd want to get your feedback on the proceedings today. So again, in the link, we will also, in the chat, we will share with you a link to our evaluation for the events today. So you can just quickly look to the chat and, just some short questions, nothing long to bore anybody. So you can just click on the link for the evaluation. It's marked evaluation, and you can provide your feedback there. But most importantly, before we go, we'd want to get your feedback in terms of any questions that persons may have that they would want to get addressed. You can use your chat, or you can ask those questions. We're here to answer any of those questions that you may have. So any questions, comments, anything that you have, we can now bring them to the fore in that regard before we close. So I'm seeing a hand raised, Nicola Thomas. You have a question, Nicola? All right, so we'll move to a question here. So one participant is asking, since the COVID-19 pandemic, the JPC has been assisting different businesses to improve their productivity output. Is there any update for those companies you have assisted? Have they seen improvements? All right, so thank you for that question, Sashana. So Sashana would have asked a very important question. So one of the things with our assessments in terms of looking at improvements, typically when we do for example, a productivity audit or any type of assessment from the technical unit, we usually do a follow-up. So for most of the assessments that we would have done so far, they would still have been missing from it or incomplete, the follow-up aspect of it. Even though we would have completed the audit aspect or the assessment, we're still doing our follow-ups to ascertain the level of improvement. So improvements to us, we're not just about just doing an audit, doing an assessment. We want to see through our customers, our clients to the end with their improvement. So to answer that question more specifically, so we're actually in progress now for those questions that, for those customers that would have done assessments for, to see how they would have shifted in terms of the initial assessment. And likewise for this exercise that we're asking you guys, that is why we're saying, in order to apply the 5S, we're asking you to look at the before picture in terms of literally take some before pictures, videos to document the state of where you were before. Also complete the 5S assessment sheet. Then use what you have learned here today to apply the 5S principle. And then after you have done that now, take some pictures, videos to use to validate. And for us, we can now calculate, for example, the improvement that you would have seen based on the evidence you would have provided to us. I hope that answers your question, Sashana. I hope if you guys have any other questions, feel free, type them in the chat and we will answer. Any other questions? All right, so I have a question for the participants here today. So the first person to tell us what is the fourth S in the 5S, we have a gift for you. So the first person to tell us what the fourth S is, we have a gift for you. So you can just type in the chat, whatever platform you're viewing this through. The first person, the very first person, we have a gift for you. What is the fourth S? All right, so we're seeing some persons responding. All right, so the team will do the necessary assessment to determine who was first and who got the answer right first. So maybe someone may have responded first, but maybe your answer isn't correct. So whoever responded first and is correct, we will contact you and let you know in that regard who that person is and how to retrieve, most importantly, your gift. Any other questions, any comments, any feedback? So just to reiterate, we would have posted several things in the chat. Again, I'm requesting of the participants, your name, if you want to state the organization you're representing, and your email address, very important. We want to send to you the productivity toolkit link, which would have in it the requisite documentation for you to complete your self-assessment of your facility or your space. So that's one. The link is already placed in this chat as well, but don't be alarmed if you click on it and it doesn't give you access currently. We will allow that access shortly. Secondly, we're asking you to complete the evaluation. So that is for this delivery today. In terms of rating it, areas for improvement. I mean, we're the productivity center after all, so we want to see that we're improving. So that link is marked evaluation, and it was sent in the chat. So you can feel free to do that as well. So those would be the two main things that we want from you guys. And certainly as it relates to a deadline for responding to the self-assessment. So we would want you ideally to submit all your documentation based on the link, based on the information in the productivity toolkit. We want you to make your submissions by June 30th. So that we're giving you one full complete week. So you have all the time to select a space, a workspace, whether it's at in your work, whether it's service, manufacturing, wherever it is. We give you the liberty and freedom to select that space. Take your pictures or videos or a combination of both. Complete the 5S assessment sheet, which is in the productivity toolkit. So you can download it and complete it, score yourselves objectively. Apply, then after that, now you'll apply the principles that you'd have learned here today and optimize that workspace using 5S and take some pictures after, pictures and videos, and then you can send to the email that is provided in the productivity toolkit as well. So we have an email for you. So if you have any questions at any time, we're not just leaving you. You can send an email to that address, or you can call us. Our information is there as well in that productivity toolkit link. All right, so I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions, any comments. We are willing to, we have a little more time so we can facilitate any questions, comments before we go. All right, so I see here another question from Sashana. Is productivity being underestimated given the day-to-day benefits of recent technology innovations that might not add directly to measured output? To answer that question simply, Sashana, I think productivity, I wouldn't necessarily say productivity is being underestimated, but what I will say is that I think persons may not necessarily understand the full or get a full understanding of what productivity is. And so, persons having that lack of understanding, it may impact then the benefits then that technological innovations have made in terms of increasing output in various processes and so forth. So I think because I know that for a fact, a lot of persons operate in a way that is productive, but they may not, because they're not understanding or don't understand how to maybe measure the innovations and improvement within their processes. It makes it a bit difficult for them to know or to see the direct growth or improvements that their processes or whatever they're doing is actually making. So thanks for that question. Very good question. All right, if there is no other question, and you would have sent your emails in the chat and your names, we will conclude here today. Certainly, we want to reiterate that the Productivity Center is here. The Technical Assistance Services Unit is here to support you. We are located at the Air Jamaica building, which is the 12th floor. And we can be contacted at 922-1598. So that's 922-1598. So you can feel free to reach out to us for anything regarding your operation. If you want to improve your productivity, we can certainly help you in that regard. And so I want to thank you all for participating today. I hope that most importantly, it would have created some value for you. We shared with you 5 simple steps. The 5S methodology, a very simple tool that is applicable right across all industries and individually as well. And so we want you to now play your part in doing your own self-assessments, whether that be in your organizations, and just share back with us based on the link we provided in the productivity toolkit. Again, if you have not provided your email, you can just feel free to share that with us. And we will, at the end of this session, send all the required links to you just to ensure that you would have had access in order to complete. So without further ado, I want to say thanks again. And thank you to the team as well, the TASU team, for sharing with you this powerful but very simple 5S tool. All right, so take care, guys. All the best.
So I'd like to just say a final thank you to all the participants and all the viewers that attended today's workshop. If you feel that this workshop has indeed added value and it's a message worth sharing, we encourage you to let your friends and your colleagues and your family members know how important productivity is, and for you to go ahead and share the Jamaica Productivity Center YouTube page with them so they can go ahead and watch it. Again, if you are interested in applying 5S and you'd like that productivity toolkit, be sure to send us your email. If you don't want to put in a chat, you can always send us an email at JPC at mlss.gov.jm. And remember, you can also go and watch our forum from yesterday, so you can get information on the strategies that we can use to transform our economy as we prepare to come out of this pandemic and use productivity improvement as the way out. Also, don't forget to tune in on Friday at 2 p.m. Instagram Live to hear who has won the Productivity Innovation Competition, first ever by the Jamaica Productivity Center 2021. So you'd want that information. You're going to want to hear what the idea was about. Tune in, and we'll also be having giveaways. So for the winners of the giveaways, don't forget to contact us, and we'll let you in on your prizes. Again, see you on Friday.